Gunmen kill 60 at Borno funeral. President condemns attack. Many flee homes as bloody clashes erupt between factions of Transport Workers Union in Ibadan. On the foreign scene, 3 shot dead at U.S. Food Festival. And in sport, Nigerian sprinter Blessing Okagbare queries list of athletes for the 2019 African Games.
This is ANN News.
Area of Burundi State, where at least 60 persons were killed by gunmen at a funeral. The killings were said to be a reprisal attack by insurgents in Badu village. 11 others were wounded. Local government council chairman Mohammed Bulama said the insurgents had recently attacked the village, but were repelled by villagers and members of the vigilante group. President Muhammadu Buhari has condemned the attack. He says the armed forces had assured him the perpetrators would be fished out so they can face the law. Gunshots rang out over the weekend in Egbeda, a suburb of Ibadan, between rival factions of the recently proscribed National Union of Road Transport Workers. Many residents fled their homes and ran for cover to avoid being accidentally shot or wounded in the melee. Some were said to have locked themselves up in their homes, while shop owners closed their businesses and ran for safety. 2 factions of the state chapter of the National Union of Road Transport Workers, run by the 2 former chairmen, were said to have violently clashed on the streets with guns, machetes, and other weapons. Oyo State Governor Seyi Makinde has proscribed the union because of its crisis. And Southeast governors have decided to take a step to guarantee safety and security in their states by establishing forest guards. They said they're worried about the growing insecurity in the country and cited the need to key into the federal government's community policing program. This action is also said to have been taken to reaffirm the zone's rejection of the controversial Ruga program. The governor said the committee will also be given the responsibility of clearing up to 50 meters into the bush in every road in the zone, so motorists can have clear view of roads ahead. The meeting was attended by governors of Abia, Enugu, and deputy governors of Anambra and Imo. Also in attendance were Catholic and Methodist archbishops of Enugu province, former Minister of Power, Professor Bath Enaji, and others. The group had resolved to ensure the safety of people's lives and property, as well as the fuel pipeline routes to Enugu. Although the Ruga settlement scheme proposal has been suspended, Nasarawa Governor Abdullahi Sule says the state would implement the project anyway. Governor Sule made the declaration while hosting a delegation of Fulani leader associations and elders in Lafayette on Sunday. He said the state was seizing on the federal government's declaration. The suspension of the scheme notwithstanding, states could choose to implement it. The governor explained that his decision to go ahead with the scheme was to ensure peaceful coexistence between herdsmen and farmers. The screening of ministerial nominees continues today. Senator Dino Melaye of Kogi West said President Buhari has made the process difficult because he did not submit the nominees' portfolios with their names. Melaye made the charge on a Sunday television interview. Screening of the president's 43 nominees began on Tuesday. Melaye says the process would have been more straightforward if the nominees' portfolios were sent along. It says some National Assembly members had requested that the president do just that, but he did not. Melaye said this has caused the senators to shoot from the dark. He has suggested screening the ministers and committees so other activities of plenary would not be delayed. Vice President Oshibaju has represented the president to the families of the deceased NYSC member Precious Owolabi, who was killed during the protest in Abuja last week by members of the Islamic movement in Nigeria. Oshibade told the family that the president wants them to take heart and to know that the loss will never be forgotten. Owolabi was killed in Abuja last week during a protest by members of Islamic movements in Nigeria, otherwise known as Shiite. Addressing journalists shortly after the vice president's condolence visit, National Youth Service Corps Director General Brigadier General Shuaibu Ibrahim said last Monday was a very sad day for the NYSC family. He said NYSC's welfare is paramount to the federal government and that the Corps had learnt a lesson from what happened to Owolabi. Coming up, African stories. DR Congo plans surveillance vaccination training for citizens to fight Ebola. And later, international stories. 3 killed, 15 wounded in U.S. food festival shooting.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to African stories. Burundi made history as the first country to quit the International Criminal Court. Then it kicked out the United Nations Human Rights Office, even as Burundi's vice president asserts in a rare interview that a troubled country is now peaceful. Reports of abuses are up ahead of next year's election. Some people worry that President Pierre Nkurunziza will run once more. Some citizens said they live in fear that the upcoming vote could be bloody like the one in 2015 that sparked political turmoil that still simmers today. The UN says more than 1,200 Burundians have been killed since Nkurunziza announced he would run for a third term. Widespread protests followed in response to which there was a government crackdown. The International Crisis Group said last month nearly 350,000 persons have fled the country. Burundi's leaders say the country is stable and the streets of the capital, Bujumbura, are bustling with daily life. A constitutional amendment would allow Nkurunziza to stay in power until 2034. A team of health experts coordinating the Ebola response to the Democratic Republic of the Congo is planning to train Congolese citizens to conduct surveillance and vaccinations in order to build trust among locals. Chris Okamringa reports.
The surveillance against Ebola has been scaled up in the DRC. It comes a week after the World Health Organization sounded the highest alarm over the outbreak. The global health body declared the disease an international health emergency after a case was confirmed in Goma, a densely populated city in the east that borders Rwanda.
People traveling from Goma, including across the border into Rwanda, there's a lot of everybody's being checked. So we over the course of this outbreak, we have tested, people, Congolese, supported by the international community, have tested more than 70 million travelers.
The WHO decided against declaring the outbreak a global emergency on 3 previous occasions because the risk of the disease spreading globally was regarded as low. But the discovery of the case in Goma changed things. The city has an international airport, which health experts describe as a gateway to the rest of the world. DRC President Felix Tshisekedi has appointed a new team of experts led by Professor Jean-Jacques Muyembe following the WHO's declaration.
What we want is to involve the population of Beni, of Mangina, and to follow the strategy we will implement there. So the first thing is to train young people and also young people of this region. So they will be in charge of vaccination, of surveillance, so they will speak the same language as the people there.
The outbreak has occurred in a conflict zone where rebels have been attacking health workers and facilities. The international community and the DRC government have come up with a program aimed at strengthening the response to the Ebola outbreak over the next 6 months. But they are calling on the world to contribute more money to help contain the deadly disease that has killed more than 1,700 people since August last year.
Tunisia's parliamentary speaker has been sworn in as the country's interim president. The interim president was appointed just hours after the death of President Beji Essebsi. He took the oath of office at the assembly in the capital, Tunis. According to the Tunisian constitution, the head of the parliament can temporarily serve as president for a maximum of 90 days. Hadnin Chawochi reports from Tunis.
Interim President Mohamed al-Nasser announced in a televised statement that he took up his new position as President of Tunisia following the death of President Beji Essebsi under Articles 84 and 85 of the Constitution.
I took the oath. I'm committed to comply with the provisions of the Constitution, to preserve Tunisia's independence and the integrity of its territory, and to respect constitutional laws and rules.
Hundreds of policemen have been deployed in Tunis and near the presidential palace in Carthage. The Commission of Defense and Security at Parliament stressed that the security situation is under control in the whole country.
The interim president took over only hours after the death of the president. The security situation is stable in the whole country. There is no political, social or security crisis. Tunisia is safe and the state security apparel and institutions are working normally.
Analysts assert that the death of President Beji Essebsi could have destabilized the country. However, the 2014 constitution was respected by all political parties. In addition, the National Army and the security forces did not interfere in the peaceful and constitutional transfer of power.
The president's death was a shock to the population because he is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The stability in Tunisia remains fragile because it is still experiencing a democratic process. While there are many terror threats, zero threat does not exist.
Interim President Mohamed al-Nasser urged parties and national organizations and associations to be confident in the state institutions and support them so that Tunisia remains free, independent and invulnerable.
Tunisia expects a high participation of foreign delegations at the funeral of President Beji Essebsi. Authorities say security measures have been tightened as the country prepares to host several kings, heads of states and prime ministers.
When we return, international news. 3 killed, 15 wounded in US food festival shooting. And later, sport. Lesson Okabere queries list of athletes for the 2019 African Games.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. On the international scene, 3 persons have been killed and 15 injured after a gunman opened fire at a food festival in California. The gunman was shot dead by police shortly after he began firing. They are now investigating reports that a second suspect may still be at large. The Gilri Garlic Festival was about to end for the weekend on Sunday evening when shots began ringing out at the site. It is almost 250 times now that there has been mass shooting in the U.S. this year. Gilroy Police Chief Scott Smithy told reporters the suspect gained access to the festival after cutting through a perimeter fence. And U.S. President Donald Trump has announced plans to replace the country's Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats. Trump says Coats would be replaced next month after a 2-year tenure marked by clashes between the two over Russian interference in the U.S. 2016 election. An acting official will be named in the next few days. Trump's suspicions of the country's intelligence agencies have grown since they concluded that Russia interfered in the 2016 election with the goal of getting him elected. It's the second day of clashes between police and protesters in Hong Kong. Police fired rubber bullets and tear gas at thousands of pro-democracy protesters near China's main representative office as authorities appealed to people to stay indoors with their windows shut. Tens of thousands of demonstrators have taken over streets near San Juan and Causeway Bay on Hong Kong Island, which has seen 8 consecutive weekends of anti-government and pro-democracy protests. Hong Kong is ranked as one of the safest cities in the world, but recent protests have been followed by violent clashes between demonstrators, police, and masked men. And 20 persons are confirmed dead in an attack targeting the Kabul office of the Afghan president's running mate and former chief of the intelligence service. Interior Ministry spokesman Nazrat Rahimi said at least 50 other persons were wounded in the attack against the Green Trend Party headquarters the previous day in the Afghan capital. He added that several gunmen were killed by security forces during an hours-long operation, which included a gun battle with the attackers who were holed up inside the building. The attackers' potential target, vice presidential candidate and former intelligence chief Amrullah Saleh, were evacuated from the building and moved to a safe location. 85 other civilians were also rescued. Iran has denounced as provocative and hostile a British proposal for a European-led naval mission to escort tankers in the Gulf amid soaring tensions over ship seizures. The condemnation on Sunday came as a Royal Navy warship arrived in the Gulf to accompany British-flagged vessels passing through the vital Strait of Hormuz. The HMS Duncan joined the frigate HMS Montrose in the Gulf to defend freedom of navigation. Britain said on Monday it was planning a European-led force to escort tankers through the world's busiest oil shipping lane, the Strait of Hormuz, in response to Iran's seizure of a UK-flagged vessel on July 19.
Still ahead, sports. Nigerian sprinter Blessing Okabere queries list of athletes for the 2019 African Games. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and Sport. Nigerian sprinter Blessing Okagbere has joined the list of those who are not happy about the names of those selected by the Athletics Federation of Nigeria for the 2019 African Games in Rabat, Morocco. The list came under heavy condemnation over the inclusion of Okagbere and other overseas-based athletes who shunned the 2019 All-Nigeria Track and Field Championships in Kaduna. Among the overseas-based athletes who stayed away from the trials but were on the 51-man list, Blessing Okagbere, Toby Amushon, Ese Brume, Doreen Amata, Divine Oduduru, Ogbo Gene Egbero, and Chukwebuka Enekwechi. Okagbere hinted that many of the athletes might have shunned the national championships over non-payment of grants by the federation. And Sierra Leone former Football Association official Abu Bakar Kaba has been banned for 5 years for accepting bribes. FIFA said Kaba was guilty of having accepted and received bribes in relation to the manipulation of international matches in violation of the FIFA Code of Ethics. The Judges Directory Chamber of the Independent Ethics Committee was also fined. That is NN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, Visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatiji. Have a pleasant evening.